In Chapter 23, you pulled together everything you have learned so far about property management and connected it to your broader national salesperson knowledge. Earlier chapters focused on what properties are worth, how they are financed, and how contracts and leases work. This chapter shifted your focus to what happens after a property is purchased and leased. Who actually runs it, how the money is managed, how risks are handled, and whether this line of work is a good fit for you. Instead of seeing property management as a side chore, this chapter treated it as a full business with its own structures, agreements, legal duties, and profit models. The snapshot below walks through the big ideas one more time and shows how they fit together. Management functions and types of managers. You learned that property manager is not just one role. There are three main types of managers. First, an individual broker or a management firm can manage properties for many different owners. Second, a building manager may work for a single owner or another manager, focusing on one property, such as an office tower or a shopping center. Third, a resident manager lives on site in an apartment or condo community and handles daily operations there. Regardless of title, the manager is a fiduciary of the owner. That means the manager must act in the owner's best interests, within the law and the management agreement, and must obey fiduciary duties such as obedience, loyalty, reasonable care, accounting, and disclosure. Many managers specialize by property type, such as single-family residential, small multifamily, large apartment communities, neighborhood retail centers, or office buildings. Because a managed property is both a physical structure and a financial asset, a good manager needs skills in several areas. Marketing skills help fill vacancies and position the property in the market. Accounting and finance skills support budgeting, rent setting, and cash flow analysis. Construction and maintenance knowledge helps the manager evaluate bids, plan repairs and improvements, and communicate effectively with vendors and owners. All of these functions must fit inside the framework of the management agreement, which defines what the manager is allowed and required to do. Reporting, budgeting, and income analysis. To the owner, a managed property is basically a small business. The manager shows how that business is performing through regular reporting. Depending on the agreement, reports may be monthly, quarterly, or annual, and often include an operating budget, cash flow statements, profit and loss statements, and comparisons of actual performance to budget. The operating budget is built from expected revenues and expenses. The manager estimates income using the concepts of potential gross income, effective gross income, net operating income, and cash flow. Potential gross income is the total of all scheduled rents, plus other income like parking, laundry, or storage fees, assuming full occupancy and full collections. Effective gross income subtracts losses from vacancies, evictions, concessions, and uncollected rents. Net operating income is effective gross income minus operating expenses, such as repairs, utilities that the owner pays, management fees, taxes, and insurance. Cash flow is net operating income minus debt service and any amounts set aside for reserves. Expenses are divided into fixed and variable. Fixed expenses tend not to change much with occupancy in the short term, such as property taxes or some insurance costs. Variable expenses rise or fall with use, such as utilities, repairs, and some maintenance. Capital expenditures are large, infrequent outlays for major renovations or replacements, such as a new roof, HVAC system, or parking lot resurfacing. Wise managers set aside reserves to smooth out these big expenses instead of letting them surprise the owner. Renting, fair housing, and tenant selection. Keeping a property properly rented and tenanted is one of the manager's most visible jobs. Vacancies are handled by setting competitive rents, marketing effectively, maintaining curb appeal, and building good tenant relations. When tenants feel they are getting good value and responsive service, they are more likely to renew leases, which reduces turnover costs. Selecting compatible tenants is crucial. Careful screening looks at income, credit history, rental history, and references while staying within fair housing rules. You learned that managers must comply with federal and state fair housing laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act where applicable, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act when credit decisions are involved. Screening criteria must be applied consistently and may not be used to discriminate based on protected classes such as race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. When criminal background checks are used, modern fair housing guidance expects landlords and managers to consider the nature, severity, and age of offenses instead of using automatic no policies that disproportionately impact certain groups. Maintenance, construction, and accessibility. Property maintenance is a constant balancing act between cost control, owner objectives, and tenant expectations. You saw three broad categories of maintenance. Routine maintenance covers day-to-day tasks, such as cleaning common areas, basic landscaping, and simple repairs. Preventive maintenance focuses on servicing systems before they fail, such as seasonal HVAC inspections or regular roof inspections. Corrective maintenance addresses items after they break. The manager must decide which services are best handled with in-house staff and which should be outsourced to specialized vendors. Construction activities include tenant improvements, renovations, and expansions. In commercial settings, tenants often require build-outs to match their business layout. Managers must coordinate these projects, verify that work meets code, and ensure that lease language clearly allocates costs and ownership of improvements. Environmental remediation, such as dealing with mold or contaminated soil, may also fall under the manager's oversight in coordination with experts. Legal issues around construction and property design include the Americans with Disabilities Act in commercial contexts and accessibility requirements in residential settings. Managers must help owners evaluate whether to retrofit, reconfigure, or rebuild certain areas to improve access and to comply with applicable law, especially where there are 15 or more employees or where the property is held open to the public. Risk management and insurance. And throughout the chapter, you saw that property management is largely about managing risk. Risk include natural disasters such as fire, flood, or storms, personal injuries like slip and fall incidents, criminal acts, employee misconduct, and professional mistakes such as mishandling trust funds. Risk can be addressed in four main ways. You can avoid it by not undertaking certain activities or eliminating hazards altogether. You can control it by installing safety features such as sprinklers, fire doors, smoke alarms, secure entry systems, and surveillance. You can transfer risk by purchasing appropriate insurance such as casualty, liability, workers' compensation, fire and hazard, flood, contents coverage, consequential loss, business interruption, surety bonds, and multi-peril policies. Or you can retain some risk through deductibles and self-insurance, backed by reserves. Tenants should be encouraged or required to carry their own renters or business insurance as well, because the owner's policy generally does not cover tenant belongings or business losses. One of the highest risk areas for a manager is the handling of trust funds. Rent, security deposits, and owner funds must be deposited into properly titled trust or fiduciary accounts, kept separate from the broker's operating accounts, and dispersed only for authorized purposes. Mishandling trust funds can lead to heavy civil and regulatory penalties and even criminal charges, so careful procedures and documentation are essential. The management agreement, structure and responsibilities. You then focused on the management agreement, which is the contract that creates the agency relationship between owner and manager and defines the manager's authority. A proper agreement includes the names of the parties, a clear property description, the term of the agreement and how it can be canceled, the owner's goals, each party's responsibilities, the manager's authority, budget expectations, cost allocation, reporting requirements, compensation terms, and an equal housing opportunity statement. On the owner's side, rights typically include receiving rent, receiving the property back in the agreed condition at the end of tenancies, entering and inspecting under agreed conditions, and reviewing books and records. Owners may retain or delegate power to select tenants, set rents, and approve vendors. They must pay management fees and fund the property according to the agreement. As owners, they remain responsible for complying with environmental laws and fair housing laws. On the manager's side, rights depend on the authority granted in the agreement. Often, managers may hire and fire staff, enter into certain contracts, and perform routine tasks without asking the owner each time, so long as they stay within spending limits and policy. Their duties include maintaining accurate financial records, providing regular reports, budgeting, marketing vacancies, screening tenants, collecting rents, maintaining and securing the property, and working toward the owner's stated objectives. Managers are liable for mishandling trust funds and for violating fair housing, credit, and employment laws. All of this reinforces a central theme from earlier contract and agency chapters. Clearly written agreements prevent many disputes. When everyone understands who does what, who pays for what, and what the goals are, the chance of conflict and litigation decreases. Leasing considerations and lease life cycle. You reviewed key lease concepts from the leasing chapter and saw how they matter in daily management. Leasehold estates can be for years, from period to period, at will, or at sufferance. Commercial leases are often estates for years with defined terms. Residential month-to-month tenancies are usually periodic estates. Tenancies at will are rare in written form, and tenancies at sufferance arise when a tenant stays beyond the lease term without permission. Rent can be structured in different ways. In a gross lease, tenants pay a fixed rent, and the owner pays most operating expenses. In a net lease, tenants pay base rent plus some or all operating expenses. In a percentage lease, common in retail, tenants pay a base rent plus a percentage of sales above a certain level. Graduated leases provide for scheduled rent increases over time. You also examined what is included and excluded in the leased premises. Physical inclusions might be built in appliances, fixtures, or furniture. Ownership and maintenance responsibilities must be clear, because insurance coverage only applies to items the policyholder owns and the lease identifies as part of the rented property. Financial inclusions refer to which expenses are included in the rent and which the tenant pays directly, such as utilities, common area maintenance, or association dues. Reversionary rights remind you that a lease is a temporary transfer of certain use and possession rights. At the end of the term, or upon lawful termination, all rights of ownership revert to the landlord, subject to any lawful claims or options. A tenant cannot sell or mortgage the property itself. Their rights are limited to those granted by the lease. Landlords have rights to enter under defined circumstances, to receive rent, to enforce rules, and to retake possession at the end of the lease, or upon lawful eviction. They must deliver and maintain premises that are habitable, with working systems, safe structures, reasonable pest control, and prompt repairs. Tenants have rights to quiet enjoyment and habitable conditions, and may have remedies such as moving out, seeking legal relief, or arranging certain repairs themselves if the landlord fails to act within the law. In return, they must pay rent, follow rules, use the property for its intended purpose, give proper notice, and return the property in clean, undamaged condition, aside from normal wear and tear. You reviewed two kinds of eviction. Actual eviction is a formal legal process where the landlord, following state law and lease terms, serves proper notice, files suit, obtains a judgment for possession, and has an officer enforce that judgment if necessary. Constructive eviction occurs when a landlord's failure to maintain the property or respect the tenant's rights makes the premises unfit for the intended use, and the tenant lawfully vacates and treats the lease as terminated. Lease termination can occur through expiration, full performance, mutual agreement, abandonment, default, and appropriate legal action. Notice in periodic tenancies, destruction of the premises, condemnation, foreclosure, or in certain tenancies such as tenancies at will, death of a party. Security deposit procedures are governed by state law, rules, and the lease. Deposits must be held properly, applied only for authorized purposes, and returned or accounted for within the legal timeframe after the tenancy ends. The Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act and state versions of it aim to standardize and clarify landlord and tenant obligations, cure ambiguous lease language, and provide balanced remedies for breaches by both sides. The management business, records, and finder fees. Finally, you saw how property management functions as a business and a career path. Sources of business include individual owners, investor groups, developers, corporations, banks, trusts, syndicates, and homeowners or condominium associations. Properties can range from single-family rentals to apartment communities, office buildings, shopping centers, resorts, mobile home parks, and specialized housing programs. Securing business depends on reputation, training, and a clear management plan. A prospective client will want to see that you understand their objectives, know the local and regional market, can analyze vacancy and absorption rates, and can prepare a realistic budget. Your plan should demonstrate how you intend to increase income, control expenses, and protect the asset. Professional development is part of building that credibility. Designations and certifications from property management organizations show that you have studied industry standards and agreed to a code of conduct. This can help you win assignments and justify your management fees. You also reviewed record-keeping requirements. Property management firms must maintain rental agreements and related documents for specified periods. Store them in an organized, accessible manner and be prepared to produce them for audits. Financial records, such as bank statements, canceled checks or images, deposit slips, receipts, ledgers, and invoices must be kept for at least the statutory minimum, often 3 years from the date of execution. Transaction folders for non-residential leases must contain confirmation of how monies were handled, copies of leases, and any applicable listing agreements. On-site folders for residential units should be organized in a systematic way, commonly by unit number. You learned that tenants in apartment complexes may be paid finder fees within strict limits. These are small credits against rent for referring new tenants, up to a defined dollar amount and number of times per year. Tenants may only introduce prospects. They may not show units, negotiate terms, or advertise themselves as rental agents. Only licensed brokers or authorized leasing agents may perform those licensed activities. Paying finder fees outside these rules can lead to discipline for the licensee. Review summary. This chapter taught you to view property management as a disciplined business that blends legal compliance, financial analysis, human relations, and long-term planning. You examined the roles and responsibilities of different types of managers, the importance of the management agreement, and the way budgets and reports translate day-to-day operations into financial results. You revisited leasing from a manager's perspective, seeing how lease types, rent structures, inclusions, and reversionary rights shape everyday decisions. You contrasted landlord and tenant rights and obligations and saw how evictions, tenant improvements, and terminations fit into the life cycle of a lease. You reinforced the central theme that good documentation and adherence to statute protect everyone involved. You also viewed property management as a career choice, not a default. By talking with your broker, honestly evaluating your own skills, seeking education and mentors, and building written policies, you can decide whether this specialty aligns with your strengths. The chapter closed by emphasizing careful record-keeping, lawful handling of trust funds and finder fees, and the need to stay within your license and expertise. Discussion. Discussion prompt 1. How does understanding potential gross income effective gross income, net operating income, and cash flow help a property manager communicate with owners and set realistic rent and expense expectations. Suggested answer: these income measures allow a manager to show owners the difference between what the property could earn if fully occupied and fully collected, what it actually earns after vacancies and collection losses, what remains after operating expenses, and what is left after debt and reserves. This helps owners understand why raising rents, reducing vacancies, or controlling expenses matters. It also prevents unrealistic expectations by distinguishing between gross rent figures and true cash flow. Discussion prompt 2. Why is it risky for a sales agent to just help out with tasks like collecting rent, paying vendors, or overseeing repairs without a written management agreement and broker involvement? Suggested answer: even simple tasks can amount to property management, which carries trust account obligations, extra liability, and specific statutory duties. Without a written agreement, there is no clear allocation of authority, compensation, or risk. The agent may inadvertently handle funds improperly, create expectations they cannot meet, or expose the brokerage to claims without the broker's knowledge. Involving the broker and using a written agreement ensures that activities are properly supervised, insured, and documented. Discussion prompt 3. In what ways can a strong tenant screening policy reduce both financial risk and fair housing risk for a property manager? Suggested answer: a consistent written screening policy that focuses on objective criteria such as income, credit, rental history, and appropriately considered criminal history helps identify tenants who are likely to pay on time and care for the property, reducing evictions and damage. At the same time, applying the same criteria to every applicant helps prevent discriminatory treatment, which lowers fair housing risk. If the policy is designed to avoid blanket bans and to evaluate criminal records in context, it reduces disparate impact on protected classes and aligns with modern fair housing guidance. Closing remarks. By the end of Chapter 23, you should see property management as a complete system, rather than a collection of random tasks. Managers are fiduciaries who operate within carefully drafted agreements, measure performance with budgets and reports, maintain and improve the physical asset, navigate landlord-tenant law, and protect both owners and tenants through thoughtful risk management. As a future salesperson or broker, even if you never become a full-time property manager, this knowledge will help you recognize when your activities cross into management, when to seek help, and how to guide clients toward qualified professionals. Property management is where real estate, law, and human behavior collide day after day. Understanding its structure and demands will make you a more rounded and capable real estate professional.